Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce Sir Maya Kesavan from the Tamil Welfare Association to give a moment of reflection.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all doing really well. I am Salmi Kesavan and I'm from the Nottingham Tamil Welfare Association. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to reflect here today. And I'd like to say a special thank you to Sue Malinda for coming to our event that we ran recently, about a month ago. We hosted our first kite festival. The kite festival is something that is very close to the hearts of Tamil people that have been displaced all over the world. Kite festivals have been quite prominent throughout the Asian culture and have been a way to celebrate skill as well as our culture. It was a really good day and we hope to run this festival for many years to come. Nottingham Tamil Welfare Association has been trying to do volunteering as well and raising money for those in need. And some of you may have already known. Last year, we raised enough money to donate to the Children's Cancer Ward to buy toys for them. And this was during the pandemic when they had to shield and didn't have the opportunity to meet others and also play with other children. So it's really the little things that we can do as a community that really make an impact on individual lives. I would like to say a little couplet, also a saying in Tamil. And this was written by Thiruvalluvar and it's called a Tirukural. And it's basically 7 words and it can be interpreted in about 1,000 different ways. So I'll say it in Tamil and I know that all of you will understand this as well. So it goes, Urupodal Makkalopu Anjal, Virutaka Panpodal Uppandam Uppu. So it can be interpreted as resemblance of bodies is no resemblance of souls. True resemblance is the resemblance of qualities that attract. So doing good deeds to help the wider community and others is something that's priceless and purely full of goodness. So I hope you all have a lovely evening today and thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'd like to wish the very, very best to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like now to move to apologies for absence. Mrs. Tambini.
Apologies for absence have been received from councillors Beardsall, Cotty, Howitt and Jonathan Wheeler.
Thank you. And now for declarations of interest. So I understand that some councillors will be declaring an interest in item 9 on the agenda. So if we could take those first and leave the others till later. So first of all, those members who wish to declare an interest as members of Binghamtown Council, will you raise your hands, please, and I'll take those first. Oh, so Councillor Francis Purdue-Horan first, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I declare an interest in item 9 as a member of Binghamtown Council, and I'll be leaving the room and not take part in anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Stockwood.
I declare a non-pecuniary interest in item number 9 and leave the room.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Stockwood. Don't have to stand up if you find it uncomfortable.
I declare an interest in item 9.
Thank you. And Councillor Gareth
Speak
Williams.
or vote on the item, but I will remain in my seat in the chamber.
Yes, we quite understand. Sorry if we finished. And Councillor Gareth Williams, please.
Thank you. I'd like to declare item 9 as a member of Binghamtown Council, and I'll stand down and leave the room for the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, are there any other members who'd like to declare an interest for item 9, please? Okay, so I have a list. So if I miss anyone, do tell me. So Councillor R. Walker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm declaring interest in item 9 on the agenda as chair of the Standards Committee and the Hearings Committee that heard complaints which could be considered as relating to matters referenced in the petition. The recommendations in the report, however, relate to matters that have not been considered by me in either role. Furthermore, the report's recommendations focus on the community government's review provisions within the Local Government and Public Involvement in Health Act, and I do not therefore consider this to be a standards matter, nor one that I cannot and will not approach with an open mind and without predetermination. I will therefore not stand down from council for the item.
Thank you. Councillor D. Mason.
I too am declaring an interest on item 9 on the agenda as a member of Standards Committee and the Hearing Committee. The recommendations in the report and the report content relate to matters that have not been considered by me in that role. I approach the item and the debate with an open mind and without predetermination, and will therefore not stand down from council for the item.
Thank you. Councillor A. Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm declaring an interest in item 9 on the agenda as I'm a member of the Standards Committee on the Hearing, where complaints which some may consider relate to issues touched on in the petition to be discussed. The recommendations in the report and the report content relate to matters that have not been considered by me in this role. I therefore do not intend to stand down from the council for item 9. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor R. Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too am declaring an interest in item 9 on the agenda as a member of the Standards Committee and the Hearing Committee, hearing complaints which could be considered as relating to the petition discussed. However, the recommendations in the report and the report content relate to the community governance review, and that was not considered by me in that role. I will be approaching the debate with an open mind without predetermination. Therefore, will not be standing down from the council for this item.
Thank you. Councillor D. Sims.
I'm declaring an item, an interest in item 9, as my wife is a town council, Binghamtown Council councillor. I do not approach this. I approach this with an open mind, not a closed mind. I believe I can openly understand the debate, and it does not prejudice me in any way. So I will be taking an active role in this debate.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I too am declaring interest in item 9 as a former member of the Standards Committee, where some of the complaints that were considered may by some be deemed to relate to the contents of the petition this evening. However, in my role, my former role on the Standards Committee did not consider any of the matters that pertain to the petition this evening, and therefore I don't consider that role is prejudicial to my approach to the debate this evening, and I'll not be standing down from the council for that item.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Everybody in?
Well, just shout. Hi. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Sorry for the slight delay. Relating to item 9, I need to declare in the openness and transparency, I'm a county councillor for Bingham West, but I have no direct involvement with the activities of Binghamtown Council in that role. And secondly, I'm a former member of the Borough Council Standards Committee, but I have not considered any items at that time that are relevant to the item that is being discussed tonight, and therefore I do not need to.
I do not need to stand down from the council.
Thank you. I have been told that we do think there is something wrong with your microphone. Is someone able to? Oh, you don't have a new one.
Me and technology, Madam Mayor, don't get on.
Councillor Campbell.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Historically, I'm a former member of the Standards Committee, but have no interest to declare in any of tonight's matters.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. And Councillor Gray.
I'm declaring interest on item 9 on the agenda as a member of the Standards Committee, where a complaint which we considered as relating to the petition have been discussed. However, the recommendation report and the report content relate to matters that have not been considered by me in that role. I approach the item and the debate with an open mind and without predetermination, and will therefore not stand down from the council.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to declare an interest in item 9? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm declaring an interest in the item 9 on the agenda as a former chair of the Standards Committee, where complaints which some may consider relate to issues touched on in this petition discussed. However, the recommendations in the report and the report content relate to matters that have not been considered by me in that role. I do not consider this, therefore, to be prejudicial to my approach to the debate this evening, and I will not stand down from the council for that item. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Are there any declarations of interest for any other items on the agenda, please? I don't think so. So now we move on to the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 1st of July 2021. Councillor Robinson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the motion to approve the minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Eddie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second that motion.
Could we show all in favour, please? That's unanimous. Now we come to, now we come to, accidentally switch that off. So now we come to my announcements. I've actually got some things to say this time. So I have had 17 sort of events that I've attended. So these range from the Taste of Rushcliffe, that was the first one, to I think my last thing was opening the Busy Bees nursery last week, which was quite funny because they gave me a car parking space in which I laid my bicycle. But they did have a bike rack as well, so that was good. Some of the highlights were, of course, as has been mentioned before, the Kite Festival, which was absolutely wonderful. Councillor Richard Mallender and I had a wonderful time flying kites, and if we'd have stayed there any longer, I think we'd have burst with all the delicious food that we were given. And it was such a wonderful event, such lovely, friendly people that were there. So thank you very much. Thank you to all of you who were able to make it and who were invited to the civic dinner. I hope you enjoyed it. So I certainly had a very enjoyable evening. And another highlight was thanks to the Deputy Mayor here, because it was the Hickling Scarecrow Festival, which I was able to attend for the whole day. And it was absolutely wonderful to see all those beautiful scarecrows, but also to engage for my first time in my life with bell ringing, which was really wonderful. It was really great being lifted off the floor. So, and the last thing that I'd like to mention out of events was the proms in the park, which was a wonderful event. One of the groups that were there, their instruments were left on the M1 in a traffic jam along with half the band. But nevertheless, they decided to do a performance for us. So they had a recording of some of their jazz music, which was Caribbean jazz music, and they just danced. It was absolutely marvellous, and we had a wonderful time dancing with Councillor Mallender, so it's very nice, to the last act. It's fantastic. And I finally finished the walk around the borough, which some of you might have seen at the civic dinner. So at last I've done all 98 miles with various people. And I've also done my 100th blood donation for the blood donor service. So I encourage anyone who's able to give blood as well. So thank you very much. Really good to be able to say something at this event. So now we come to the leaders' announcements.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few announcements to make this evening. First of all, I just want to mention the Freeport. I've given a few updates to the full council. I sit on the main board of the Freeport, and I'm delighted that on the 10th of September we submitted our outline business case to the government. As many of you know, this is looking at tens and tens of thousands of additional jobs. It's a major strategic site for Rushcliffe at the power station. So this was a huge step forward. We'll get feedback very shortly. We're online to get the Freeport delivered by the March 2022. I also just want to mention tonight, Rushcliffe Country Park, sometimes it perhaps doesn't get the attention it should do. And I'm absolutely delighted that for the 15th year running, we've just renewed the green flag status. This is a real feather in the cap for all the people that look after the park, the volunteers, the officers who work very hard, and the members who represent us as well. It's a fantastic facility. I think it really came into its own, particularly during the pandemic, in its usage. And it's something we're very proud of. Also, just to mention to members, we're investing money into that park, the CAF facility. We'll be starting construction very shortly, and will be delivered next year. Plus, we're also applying for funding for new changing places in terms of some of the toilet facilities. So again, just making it accessible for everybody. It really is an asset for this borough. Also, some of you may have seen now, construction now started with the crematorium. The accesses have actually been built into it. So I think that's a wonderful project. Something this borough really desperately needs. The main construction on site will start very shortly, and fingers crossed we should be getting that into service in the very, very near future. Lastly, Madam Mayor, just pick up two events that you talked about that are worth mentioning. The civic dinner that we had was a huge success. I think Trent Bridge looked after us very well. I think the important thing is there, we had people there who will be looking at creating thousands and thousands of jobs for this borough, as well as the dignitaries, the mayors, but also people like the Chief Constable. And it's a fantastic advert and a window for this authority. I'm absolutely delighted with the success, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for hosting that. Unless I just need to mention that promise to the park, because I did attend, and it's wonderful to see thousands of people coming out now and actually enjoying the park and the music. It was absolutely superb. I'm a little bit puzzled why Councillor Manny over there is still walking. I haven't seen him dance more than any other person I've ever seen. He actually worn part of the park cap actually there, which you probably saw it on there. It was a wonderful event, and I'm glad that we start to host those events again. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. There are no announcements from the Chief Executive, so I'm moving on to the next item. So as the item 9 report relates to the petition that's been submitted and will be presented this evening, I propose to put these two items together on the agenda. So we're switching around on your agendas items 7 and 8, and we're taking the citizens' question first. So the citizens' questions we received from Mr. Tony Wallace, and he's coming now to ask his question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. I'm Tony Wallace. I'm a member of Binghamtown Council. I'm also a resident and citizen of Bingham, and it's in that second capacity that I'd like to ask my question tonight. I'm afraid my question is that truncated compared to that which I originally submitted. I'm thankful to the monitoring officer for the advice she gave me on that. But just as a very brief piece of background, I was the councillor who submitted the complaint about the treatment meted out to the Binghamtown Park by two councillors who are present here this evening, and which you will debate later, to the monitoring officer last Christmas. I won't go into details, but the outcome of the Standards Committee investigation, decision and sanction can be found in the Council's website. It's decision 817, published on the 21st of July 2021, if anyone wants to look. And I'm sorry to say that the councils involved have chosen to disregard the sanctions. Which brings me to my question. Yes, which brings me to thank you for the indulgence, Madam Mayor. Oppressive behaviour and harassment of employees is unlawful. It impacts negatively on the working environment and on the work that the organisation strives to deliver. Does Rushcliffe Borough Council agree with me that there's no place in the modern workplace for behaviour that could be described as harassment or oppressive in the treatment of any member of staff by an elected councillor? Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Yes, could I ask, could you make sure you turn your microphones off after use, please? I know it's a bit of a nuisance, keeps turning them on and off. Councillor Moore is going to respond to the question, and he's going to, oh, you said you're going to remain seated.
Well, I'm leaning on the table, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace, for the question. Yes, of course, we absolutely agree with your comments in all cases. Just like to confirm that Rushcliffe Borough Council agree there is no place in the modern workplace for this kind of behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And now the petition, which will be presented by Ms. Yeah, no, that's for the debate, not for. This isn't item 9. This is item 8.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Tony Fox, and I represent the Bingham Deserves Better group of ex-councillors and concerned residents. For a long time, we have felt that the known principles for ethical standards in public life are being broken at Bingham Town Council. This petition was launched as other avenues for action have not borne fruit. I've only been allowed 5 minutes to present this, and within that time, it is impossible to fully explain the background to the petition and the current situation as we see it. Suffice to say, over the last couple of years, multiple complaints have been made about issues at the Binghamtown Council, most of which were not deemed worthy of formal investigation, which was difficult to understand. This petition is by a huge margin the biggest RBC has ever received, with 930 supporters signing. It would have been much higher, but it was carried out under COVID restrictions and pulled when we knew it would exceed the thresholds required. Behind it is a widespread and long-standing concern over the way the current leadership of the town council has and still is running it. Since 2010, when this leadership has been mainly present and usually in control, no less than 24 councillors have chosen not to stand for re-election. This is very telling, and in a major respect tells you all you need to know. So what are we seeking? We want the Bingham Council temporarily disbanded or dissolved pending new elections, and your council is the only authority that we believe has the power to do this. Regrettably, we have concluded that this will be the only way to bring about a collaborative, cohesive council going forward. The current toxic environment is seriously damaging the reputation of both councils. We believe that the Bingham leadership is a manipulative, secretive, and overly controlling group. Some specifics. Recently, councillors John Stockwood and Francis Purvey-Horan have been found guilty of harassing, bullying in everyday language, the female clerk. They broke your own code of conduct linked to the Nolan principles. Councillors, this took place over more than 2 years. By the way, it's not just our group saying this, an independent barrister concluded much the same. And recently, we understand the persons concerned have been suspended from the Conservative Party. After being found guilty of breaking the code, your Standards Committee very nicely asked them to, firstly, consider apologising in writing to the clerk. They didn't. She has now resigned, and legal action is yet again possible. Who pays? Not Rushcliffe, but Bingham residents. That will not go down well. Secondly, consider resigning from the key newly created Executive HR Subcommittee. They didn't resign, far from it. In fact, only last week, the HR Committee, under the control of councillors John and Maureen Stockwood, Francis Purvey-Horan and Andrew Shelton, voted Councillor John Stockwood as the new chair. The very same John Stockwood who broke the code of conduct over the HR matter. He was proposed by Councillor Shelton and seconded by Councillor Purvey-Horan. It should be noted these requests were made after the petition was handed in on the 8th of April and after the formal investigation into Councillor Stockwood and Purvey-Horan's conduct was started. To many, it shows hubris and disdain for other opinion or advice. We had hoped to see some attempt at rapprochement due to these events, but it appears nothing has been forthcoming. I could go on, councillors, and provide more of the history, but your executive won't give me the time. Please see this situation for what it really is and press your leadership to take more robust action than what the recommendation to council requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was well within time. I'm just going to remind you that this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and a recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. And in addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. Any councillor who wishes to speak should raise their hand and your request will be noted. You will be asked to speak in turn by me, and then you may turn on your microphone. In respect of voting, when asked by me, councillors should raise their hand to indicate how they wish to vote. If a roll call is requested, councillors' names will be called out alphabetically by the monitoring officer. A councillor may raise a point of order or make a personal explanation at any time by raising their hand, and I will hear them immediately, and my ruling on the matter will be final. So now we move on to item 9, the petition, which is on the community governance review for Binghamtown Council. So we need to wait now to allow those councillors who have declared an interest for item 9 to sit at the back of the room or leave the meeting. Councillor Mrs. Stockton will remain in her seat but not take part in the item. Councillor Robinson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The first thing I just want to say is to commend Mr. Fox and his team, who've done an awful lot of work in putting this petition together. And I think it really needs to be noted, it comes over very strongly for the passion you have for your residents. I think everybody in this room has actually felt that, not just tonight, but over the number of years I know that you've been making representations. So I would like to publicly sort of acknowledge that, the huge amount of work and, as I say, the passion which you speak. It's quite interesting, Mr. Fox, you mentioned about the Nottingham principles. These are the principles that we all should act as elected members in any authority. And it really covers transparency, openness and professionalism in your roles, be it whatever tier of authority we work at. It is also very important that the authorities themselves work with very, very high standards. As far as I'm concerned, there's no excuse whatsoever with the amount of support that is around, particularly local government, to assist local government itself in terms of the support it actually needs. So organisations like NAC, the LGA, upper tier authorities are always there to help authorities when they have challenges. And it is really important that we have the very, very best of local government. It's really about talking and serving our residents. I understand, I think we all appreciate, as I said, the passion in which this petition has been delivered. And you cannot fail to be impressed with the amount of people who've actually signed this petition. Nearly 10% of the population of Bingham. And as Mr. Fox said, probably could be even more as it was done under a pandemic. So these aren't small numbers, and as I say, these are all residents. It is very important members though understand about this debate. We are only discussing the 2 outcomes which are proposed in the petition. And I want to make it absolutely clear, these are to dissolve the council and take over the operation until new elections can be held. That is the first call for action. And secondly, to reset the culture and strengthen the procedures at the council so that the above mentioned concerns cannot continue. Can I make it absolutely clear to all members, this is not about standards committee. It is not about the behaviour of 2 councillors. It's not about the budget, the finances at Bingham. It is about this council considering those 2 calls for action. Now, our response to this petition is governed by the Local Government Act of 2007 and also by the guidelines of the Community Government Reviews, which was updated in 2010. And it is very important when we debate this that we have to view it through the lens of this legislation. And often you hear the phrases, this authority does not make law, it implements law. Law is made in Westminster. So we cannot make laws. And we have to work through the lens of this legislation. At this point, I just want to refer members to section 4.3, page 21, because it'd be remiss not to mention this. It tells in there about the Cabinet considered this petition in June. And we proposed at that Cabinet to set a cross-party working member group up, as we have done in many challenges that we have with the authority. with a view of putting recommendations to Cabinet in September and then coming to full council. Now, unfortunately, other people saw that differently, and I find that a little bit disappointing, but we are where we are, because we believe, say, progress would have been made. I just want to make absolutely clear that Cabinet did not actually make a decision at that point on the petition. It was purely a proposal to set the cross-party working group up. Just going back to legislation of 2007, be absolutely clear, this petition is effectively asking Rushcliffe to trigger fresh elections, disband the council and trigger these elections. I just want to quote from the papers you have in front of you. Bear in mind that these were taken with very professional legal advice, as well as the officers with their experience as well. That these are not recommendations within the 2007 Act that a CGR is lawfully able to make. Let me just repeat that. These are not recommendations within the 2007 Act that a government review is lawfully able to make. And that really sums up the situation and our response to those calls for action. Ultimately, elections and the cycle of elections are the pillars of democracy. And I, for one, will always support that. And I think it's a very dangerous precedent that every time a council, if we don't feel behaving, that suddenly we want to dissolve and just call an election. And I say, I don't think that is a road in which we should be going down. However, I considered the officer recommendations that were made there, and they say they were done with professional opinion and support. But I believe that certainly one of those recommendations needs to be more robust and have the teeth to do something tangible and time effective. So members, I would like to change one of the recommendations that are actually down there, which is recommendation E. And this will come on the screen now. So if you look at your papers, there are two sides to this recommendation that I'm proposing tonight. Basically, the council supports commitment to work collaboratively with Binghamtown Council. And we are going to right now to offer to set up an improvement board to review governance and improvement issues at the town council. And I'm requesting that the monitor officer will make necessary changes to our constitution to allow the council to establish a group. So the main thrust of this recommendation is to put an overarching improvement board over Binghamtown Council. Very similar to the lines of a board that is running Nottingham City Council at the moment. Many of you are aware of the challenges that the city has had. The government response in there was to put an improvement board in there. And secondly, is really to make sure that fits in with our constitution as Rushcliffe to allow us to actually do that. I feel an improvement board that should be chaired by an independent person, should have a board of very committed and talented individuals, can make a real difference to Binghamtown Council. It can really start to make it more efficient and effective and make it a much more fit for purpose authority for its residents, as we've heard from Mr. Fox. So I'm going to move the recommendations. But just before I do, well, the recommendations, as I said in there, and I'll do this, Madam Mayor, under is it section 2, A, B, C, D, but changing E to be that recommendation there that members can see. I'm also going to write to the Secretary of State to request that they actually review legislation to make it more fit for purpose. I think times have moved on since 2007. And I really do think there should be improvements actually in there. I'm also going to write to MPs as well, our local MPs, to ask for their support in this matter as well. But there are two very important messages I just want to finish speaking today. And this is a message to Binghamtown Council, both to officers and to the elected members, is to listen and take on board this petition and the comments that support this petition. This is nearly 10% of your population is giving you very, very clear message. And I want you to work with Rushford Borough Council to support this board 100%, to open your hearts, to work with them, commit with them to make Bingham Council a better place, not only to work, but the democracy, the governance, and its ability to deliver. So this never ever happens again. There are 18 months to go before the next election, and we need to start this work right now. And that is my bid to make that tangible difference. Because I really think Bingham has unique potential. I look at the square there, I look at the wonderful medical centre, the school.
Can you wind up now, please?
I look at the new leisure centre being built. I think it's a wonderful, unique place. And at the moment, it's been sold short. So please take us on board. Let's vote for these recommendations and let's make Bingham a better place. Thank you.
Second, please. Do you have a second?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, sorry. So it's the second over here first. Sorry.
Madam Mayor, may I just check, do you still want the recommendation here on the screen? Yeah.
Yes, please, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sadly, we'll never know if the member group would have led to a different outcome here. And I certainly welcome the revised recommendation. So I'd like to second the motion and the recommendation and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Gowland, what you need to ask for is to suspend standing orders for a set period of time, and you need a second.
Can I call to suspend standing orders for 5 minutes? Sorry, beg your pardon. Can I call to suspend standing orders actually probably for 10 minutes and will be
Yes, I'll second that.
I think, yeah, it's my decision that we can, it's 10 minutes, did you say? If we can be a bit quicker than that, shall we say 7? 7 minutes. 7.5, well, it should really be 7. Okay, starting now. Well, thank you very much for everyone for being so prompt in returning. And now I'd like to ask Councillor Walker if you'd like to respond, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Manager, and thank you for allowing us that time to discuss. I'm going to pass over to Councillor Gomez. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At their best, the town and parish councils are the voice of local communities and they represent their residents as the most present and local form of government. I've been incredibly fortunate in my time as a parish councillor in Rudlington to sit as a councillor on a council that is open and progressive as a parish council. We're fortunate to have a broad swathe of councils that represent and reflect the democratic profile of our village. Profile of the village. Parish meetings are chaired with dignity and fairness, and meetings are conducted politely with an inclusive manner that encourages and fosters the engagement of the public. At their worst, town and parish councils are a laughing stock. They're often viewed as parochial, small-minded, fighting over whether hedges should be clipped, which flags should be run up flagpoles on long-forgotten public dates, or whether kids in hoodies should be allowed to sit in local memorial gardens. Unfortunately, the terrible activities that have been occurring in Bingham are clearly the actions of a town council operating at its worst. An elite clique of small-minded individuals has consistently trumped the democratic process and shut down debate. They've been accused of bullying public servants and repeatedly carrying out important decisions behind closed doors, shutting out the public and removing them from the democratic process. They have acted with impunity and shown palpable disrespect for the community and the residents that they're meant to represent. I was fortunate to grow up as a kid in Wrekin-on-Trent, and I'm well acquainted with Bingham and its people as our closest neighbour. On the whole, the people of Bingham are friendly, progressive, and want to live in a town that is open and inviting. This is not what the minority who control the town council behave like, and they do not reflect the character of the majority of people in their community. As a Labour group, we weren't planning on voting against this recommendation because it forces us to disregard a petition signed by more people from Bingham than voted for any of the individual councillors in question in the last town council election in 2019 and I believe in the borough council election. And as a Labour group, we were going to be voting against recommendations in this report and in support of the residents of Bingham in their quest for democracy. Obviously, we understand the legal implications that have been explained to us around the petition. However, we cannot allow this recommendation to pass. We couldn't have allowed it to pass and simply ignored the wishes of changed it to 930 people with only suggesting a little bit of help. But now I'd like to write this on my hand because it was out there in the corridor. Then we would support this motion now with the addition of Councillor Robinson's alterations of the officer's recommendations. If we could guarantee that about this improvement board, we'd like to know who's going to run it, whether it involves anyone from Bingham, and whether or not we want it to be referenced back, members of that group need to be referenced back to this council before the next meeting so we can find out who that is before we pass it. If we can agree to that, then we're more than likely to go for this. What I'm just going to add. As Mr. Fox stated, and I know that's not to talk about standards committee, but it's quite important to just mention one or two things about it. The Borough Council set out a series of sanctions against the Town Council, and so far we've not heard any report as to whether the demands have been met. These were to invite the subject members to apologise to the Town Clerk, and we've not received or heard any sign that that's happened. No written version and no oral version of that having happened. The committee invites the subject members, this is number 2, to reflect on the appropriateness of their membership on the Bingham HR committee. Not only do they think it's appropriate for them to behave like they do, but then to allow themselves to vote themselves as heads of that committee is shocking. So I'm bringing that up because it's quite important, because we need to know if we're voting for a review board that it isn't going to involve anyone that's been involved in that shenanigans, because they've put themselves, if they're in that position, they will put themselves into that position. So finally, the petition does request that we take over governance in the short term and trigger an election as soon as possible. Well, we've heard that we can't do that, although it really does seem to be the only fair course of action. What can't be allowed to happen is it can't be allowed to disappear and the terrible actions pass by unpunished. Hopefully, sooner rather than later, the people of Bingham can elect a council that represents them, and not one that shuts down debate and acts with supercilious disdain for their community. So that's it. We will be voting in favour of this motion now, as it's been
for this recommendation now that it's been changed. And we thank you for that addition. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gore. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. No council is perfect. For example, I strongly criticise this council for its massive ongoing failures to actively monitor large house building and enforce basic requirements. But this is open criticism and not personal. But the issues at Binghamtown Council clearly have been at another level for quite a long time. Having read and heard the allegations about the many matters, it is clear that Binghamtown Council needs a serious reset. The report is clear that it is not in the gift of the council to dissolve Binghamtown Council, and it's also clear from the petitioner and from other sources that the findings of the Standards Committee have not been implemented. Most telling though is in paragraph 4.8, where Rushcliffe wrote to all Binghamtown councillors over a year ago offering to address the concerns about standards. The report is silent about any response. The blatantly obvious conclusion is the offer remained an offer. The question is, why wasn't it taken up? The conclusion can only be that there is something very, very unsatisfactory in the state of Binghamtown Council. External peer support has been offered, and I welcome Councillor Robinson's changes to the officer's recommendations on the proviso, as has been mentioned, that some of the actors in Binghamtown Council are not part of that body. It makes one wonder whether wholesale resignations would be in order. It is in Bingham's interest that a new wave of vigorously community-minded residents stand for election and refresh the town council. Madam Mayor, I would have voted to abstain on the basis of the report as it was, because although I accept that we cannot dissolve Binghamtown Council, I fully recognise the strength and legitimacy of the petitioner's cause. So on the basis of some clarification about the detail behind this, I'll be supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a very, very difficult situation, and it's extremely disappointing that Bingham finds itself in this situation. Bingham is a growing community. It's going to be growing hugely over the next few years with a lot more housing there. Clearly something needs to be done to sort out the governance of the town council so that it's fit for purpose, not just now, but for a much, much bigger town that will be the one that we will all see a few years from now. It is very difficult to sort of dissociate position and the conclusions that were reached at the Standards Committee and the panel, and obviously expressed disappointment that recommendations that were made there have not been followed through. The Standards Committee is limited in the sanctions that it can take, and yes, it's an awkward situation. I didn't write a speech in advance for this one. I think I would need to. I still don't feel I need to. And I think it's a situation that all fair-minded members of this council can see for what it is. I think that there is something rotten happening in Binghamtown Council at the moment. It clearly needs to be addressed. That said, again, we are limited in what we can do as an authority. I do thank the leader of the council for bringing forward this revised recommendation. My intention was, on reflection, I think, to abstain, but I think I will now be supporting this recommendation in the hope that Bingham can find a better way forward together for all the people of that community and not just for a self-selecting few. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. it's become quite clear that community governance review is not the correct mechanism to deal with this very sorry situation in Bingham. We will support the officer recommendation and the change to it suggested by Councillor Robinson. But I would like to suggest a further change to item E, to add at the end that the terms of reference and membership of the improvement board be approved by council. Thank you.
You have a second at the back. Okay, it's Councillor Gannon. You wish to speak, Councillor Gannon? In that case, you want to take that? Someone's just made an amendment. Could you read out your amendment, please, Councillor Thomas?
That the terms of reference and membership of the improvement board be approved by council.
Yes. Just writing it down. Councillor Robinson, would you like to respond to that addition?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, in terms of this board, and I hope, please take this in the right spirit. What I want to do is to bring this board back, and you have my guarantee, this will come back in December to council. It gives us about 8 weeks to set this up. All I've said there, bear in mind, this is only a couple of days I've had this to work on this. It's just going to be based very much on Nottingham City Council Improvement Board. You can see there. The independence is absolutely key as a chairman. So coming back to December will be the full terms of reference, the proposed membership to be voted on this board in December. Okay. I prefer not, and we will not support changing that recommendation. We feel it's all there, and as I say, I'm standing up now on record to say we'll come back in December. Okay.
Does anyone want any more debate on that addition that's been suggested, that amendment? Right, so this is the amendment to the amendment that we're voting on now. So this is the one that's just been suggested. Would you like to speak?
With the assurances by Councillor Robinson, I withdraw my suggestion.
Thank you. In that case, Councillor Clark.
Phew. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, to be honest, that Councillor Robinson set out very clearly and succinctly in his opening speech on this particular debate exactly the right position and the right situation. So I'm certainly not going to start going through and repeating the reasons why the Localism Act won't allow some of the actions that are actually proposed in the petition. However, I want to concentrate really on page 26, which relates to the managing standards in local government, which is sort of the latter part of paragraph 4. So it talks especially in 427, it talks about the standards within the Localism Act. 428, and it makes reference to the fact that the town council has been offered support. And then in 429, it talks about the various means of support. So we have NOUC, the National Association of Local Councils, and it talks about the Local Government Association, and that's where I can speak with, I think I'm safe in claiming, Madam Mayor, more experience in this room than anybody else regarding the LGA, because I have worked with many other councils around the country on peer support, on improvement and peer reviews and the like. And for me, what this petition has really done is provided a great catalyst for opportunity. We've got the opportunity to have transformational change and improvement within Binghamtown Council as Councillor Robinson very clearly outlined. So there is undoubtedly a reputational impact on both Binghamtown Council and the Borough Council with this present situation. It can't continue as it is. The proposal for an improvement board is a great way to try and achieve that transformational change. And it comes at a great time for Bingham because Councillor Mallender, Richard Mallender, just outlined the new housing, but the new facilities, the new leisure centre, there's a new primary school being built for the housing, there are new industrial units. There's a lot of new development and new potential coming in Bingham. So now is the great opportunity to have that transformational change to come and support both the town council and the residents of Bingham. So I believe this is exactly the right way to go, and I'll fully support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councillor Edivine. Oh, sorry. Missed you out, Councillor Butler. I do apologise, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we've heard a lot this evening, and I fully support the revised recommendation. We've heard the passion that Mr. Fox and his colleagues and the concerns they have, and indeed all the people who signed the petition. And what a shame it is, because Bingham is a lovely town. And I seem to recall that in the last 2 or 3 years, it was voted one of the most popular places to live in the country, or certainly in Nottingham, in the Midlands. I can't even be sure if it's country or not. So it's a shame that we're in this position, but it has been very clearly explained. We are where we are with regards to the legislation, so which has been explained very clearly and very well, and I don't need to repeat that. And indeed, it's in the report as well. So, so really, Madam Mayor, I think that just really to confirm my support, but we do, or certainly I very much get the message and the concern that has been raised by the residents and the petitioners. We've seen and read it for ourselves. We've also heard people talking about it as well. And as Councillor Clark has just said, I think this should be seen as an opportunity. Whilst it's regrettable that we are having to find alternatives to an opportunity, we are here to do that. And I get the feeling that we as a council, in fact, I know that Rushcliffe as a council, whole council is fully behind this. And let's hope that Bingham and this whole unfortunate situation that we're discussing at the moment can move to a better place sooner rather than later, and look at all the positives that are to come. So thank you, Madam Mayor. I support the recommendation.
Councillor Gatlin, please.
Thank you. I strongly believe in local democracy, and I believe that local matters should be decided locally, but we don't want chaotic administration either nationally or in Binghamtown Council. We don't need any more behaviour that brings politics and democracy into disrepute. We don't need elected politicians marking their own homework. I would really like to ask the Leader of Council if you could consider writing to the Secretary of State to consider changing the law on this matter. 10% of the residents signed this petition. If that was an MP, they would be recalled. It's very unfortunate that we're unable to make this happen. So I welcome this amendment, but I think really it would be better if this could actually get this to council recall. Thank you.
I'm sure Councillor Robinson will respond to that in his right to reply. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak before? Councillor Sims.
Yes, I would like to have a few moments to address the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to bring it to the fore that I really thank the hard work that's been carried out clearly by the people forming this petition in times of COVID, going out the way for democracy at the end of the day. So the Better for Bingham group, I'd like the council to commend what they've done, to bring it to our attention and to raise the profile of things going wrong with our local government and within a town within our borough. So I'd like to thank them, and I'd really take on board. I'd like members to thank them as well for their hard work, because Bingham does deserve better.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Anyone else? Okay, so Councillor Edvin, you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's quite clear that there's virtually no one in this room who doesn't agree with all the hard work that's gone into presenting this petition. And it really is something that we need to move forward. But, you know, I wholeheartedly support the recommendation change in E. And I myself was going to actually raise paragraph 4.27 that Councillor Clark raised. And I'd just like to sort of point out, I won't read the whole thing, but the first line of that is promote and maintain high standards of conduct by members. And that is incumbent through the Localism Act of all parish councillors and town councillors. I'm not going to say any more than that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edvin. And so Councillor Robinson, you have your right to reply, please.
Thank you. First of all, Mr. Fox, you've heard the debate. I think you hear the passion for members as well. That we want to make Bingham a better place. I think you support cross party. Politics doesn't really come into this. Yeah, it's really got to make Bingham fit for purpose. And there is a desire and commitment from everybody here to make sure that actually happens. I just want to address Councillor Gowland, and you're absolutely right, Secretary. I don't think legislation is good enough. I said it in my speech at the start. It's about fit for purpose. And having legislation 14, 15 years old. So I will be including that in my letter to the new Secretary of State, of course, not the existing one. We probably had an interest in this anyway, didn't they? I think what I heard, and I can't remember an adjournment in a full council meeting before to look at this, so that's the first. But I'm delighted, and again, let's take politics out of this. I think all of us like fair debate, we like democracy. But I think all of us want the very best for our residents. And I'm sure this is exactly what Bingham want. It's really a case now of drawing this line. Let's support this recommendation and this board. As I said, I wish I could come here with a whole plan of how the board will work, but literally this was only a couple of days ago. I just felt that it really did need to be more robust in terms of taking this forward. I've looked into quite a lot of detail, the way in which the board works at Nottingham City Council. I think there's some huge advantages in the way that's set up. I think it's really pressure now on, of course, the Chief Executive and myself to sit down with the monitoring officer to see exactly what we can do. But the one thing I want to assure you is that I don't want this to be a talking shop. It's got to be about action. Yeah. So when we come back in December, I hope you can absolutely support the recommendations we actually bring. But most importantly, the day after, we're doing. Yeah. Because it's really proof of the pudding. Yeah. I've seen too many things set up which perhaps don't deliver what they should do. Just a few principles absolutely clear before I finish though. We do need Bingham to support this. Yeah, we cannot impose this on them. I see the mayor is there. Hope you're hearing this. Yeah, and that you will see us very shortly and your commitment to get this done. I think secondly, and this is really, really important, is that we need to make sure that the things we do are for the residents. Yeah. And make sure it's about the delivery of Bingham Town Council. I don't think residents are that interested in meetings and constitution, all the rest of it. They actually want to see a car park built. Yeah, they want to see a better square. They want to see better facilities. That's what residents want. And of course, underpinning that, as Councillor Gaunt said very well, is democracy. Well-run council about the delivery. And I can absolutely assure everyone in this room that's what Rushcliffe Borough Council want to do. And support Bingham to do that. So thank you for your comments, and I look forward now to the vote to take this motion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. So could all show in favour, please? Okay, that is unanimous in favour. Thank you. Now we'll allow the councillors to return to their seats, and any members of the public who wish to leave, if you would like to vacate the room now, you don't have to, but if you want
you all for your support for Bingham. I just hope the mayor and everybody else is going along with your improvements to that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now we come to item 10, the appointment of independent persons. Councillor Robinson to move, please.
Thank you. Hopefully this should be fairly quick. I don't got any adjournments, but I hold my breath. This is an administrative item. This is really just a recommendation to appoint Mr. Christopher Richards and Helen Richardson as our two independent persons on the Standards Committee. Obviously quite appropriate talking about standards. It is required under the Local Act of 2011. They serve a term of 2 years. So this is really just about bringing those two names before council to get their approval as required. I'd also just like to pay a public thank you to Mr. John Bagley, who'll be stepping down, who's done a really good job, I think for many years, around 10 years, I think he's been with us since I've been here. So a big thank you. It's a really big contribution, and it's a really important balancing person and independence that, say, council actually need. And I think John has fulfilled that role very well. He will actually be a handover of a year to make sure that the new people understand and the way things work. So I'd just like to do the recommendation, section 2, page 29. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Moore to second, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very happy to second the recommendation and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any discussion? So Councillor Walker, please.
Yeah, the Labour Group would like to warmly welcome Mr. Richards and Mrs. Richardson and thank Mr. Bagley for his time since 2015. We're looking forward to working alongside him. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Move it there.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mullender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I support as well.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We support the officer recommendation and thank the two individuals for undertaking this valuable role. I just hope they won't be kept too busy.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? So, Councillor Moore, you reserved your right to speak.
I have nothing further to add, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to go along and move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Robinson, you have the right to reply. All in favour? That's completely unanimous in favour. Thank you very much. And now we come to devolution and levelling up in Nottinghamshire. Councillor Robinson to move, please.
The government has consistently said that it would like to see more efficiency and effectiveness of local government and a more coordinated approach when you think of all the different tiers that we have in local government and right across the country. And the Prime Minister actually underlined his support for devolution levelling up earlier this year, this summer, and there will be a paper actually coming out very shortly with more detail onto that. Following the announcement of the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State wrote to myself and other councils to announce something called a county deal. Now, he was actually looking for pathfinders, so actually councils and counties who were looking really to be the forerunners of this devolution. So, board members, just look at the principles that set out in section 4.2. These are the ones that the Secretary of State wrote to me about. These were really underpinning how he would see county deals going forward. The leader of Nottingham County Council and the leader of Derbyshire County Council did write back to the Secretary of State to welcome these announcements and wanted to participate in being a pathfinder for these county deals. I mentioned Derbyshire because, again, they have very similar structure to Nottinghamshire, and we're actually working in parallel to them as well. Can I just stress with this is very different to previous unitary talks and everything else. This actually involves Nottingham City Council as well. So this is 1.1 million people in the county, regardless of borders. So it's the 7 districts, the city and the county itself. So following, as I mentioned, the government invitation to participate, we as leaders met in early September, where we talked about some of the frameworks of how a county deal would actually work. Also, parallel to this, chief executives, including our own, has actually met with other chief executives and senior officers, just to look at how, as I say, we can actually find a county going forward. Of course, the drivers is really about efficiency, being more effective, and say being more coordinated. And that's absolutely key. And it's really about providing a better service to our all our residents and get rid of some of the duplications that are actually in there. And in fact, today, the Chief Executive and myself have been at a leaders meeting where this paper, Emerging Themes and Priorities for a County Deal, was discussed. And while it's really confidential at the moment, I just want to share some of the ambitions. And it's there making a difference for 1.1 million people and 40,000 businesses. So this is a real big step. It's about attracting significant inward investment, delivering quality places, and one that I'm sure we'll all be very keen on, tackling climate change and protecting local people from its impacts. So I think these are really worthwhile ambitions, and it's a very important project as we go forward. One of the key attractions for Nottinghamshire to be a pathfinder is the fact that we actually have something called an EPC. It stands for the Economic Prosperity Committee. It's been in situ for quite a few years now, hasn't it? And basically, it's a forum where all these get together. It's got a constitution, and under that umbrella, that is the way in which devolution will come down from the government. So up to the upper tiers of Nottinghamshire County and the city, and then into the EPC, which of course the districts and things. You'll see in the report there are work streams, things looking at waste, and transport, the environment. All these areas that are in there. We need to do some work with the EPC because at the moment it doesn't have a constitution fit for purpose to handle this. So there is work being done that's been agreed today to bring that back to allow things like sub-work groups, focus groups, to make sure that we can deliver and get this levelling up. What I do need to stress here, members, is that this is about attracting inward investment. We all know the East Midlands, particularly Nottinghamshire, really suffered from a lack of investment. One of the issues for that is that it's been dysfunctional, politically, council-wise, at every level, right across the East Midlands, not just Nottinghamshire, the whole area. And that's why it's really important now, the government looking to us now is get your ship in shape, get your government right, and there's some serious money coming our way. So what this paper is really all about is just giving your endorsement that the Chief Executive and myself, that we stay at the table. I do assure you all the outcomes that will come out of this will come back to this full council for debate and for voting, because we appreciate this is a very big step. But we feel, the Chief Executive and I, that it's certainly really important that we're in the shaping of this very exciting project. So I'd like to move the recommendations that are set out there, and it's on page 33, section 2, and just the assurance that, again, this is about the endorsement, but the outcomes will come back to this full council in which we can debate in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Eddie Green to second, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second the recommendation, and it seems to me that county deals seem to have a lot of support across political parties. I won't say more than that, and I'll reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Enby. Sorry, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, Councillor Garrington, speak on behalf of the. Thanks so much. We support this motion because we believe in making decisions as close as sensible to citizens, as previously discussed. In fact, I believe that diversity in local councils will produce the innovative solutions that we need to our problems. But things have to be decided at the right level. We need the town council in West Bridgford to deal with planning the high streets and shedding the grass cutting, and conversely, it would clearly be better for city, county and boroughs to work together on many issues related to economic development, transport, road maintenance, and of course, the environment. It isn't often I agree with Robert Jenrick, but I agree with him that we need to be devolving power to local places and closer to citizens. Just strange that it's taken so long. We hear a lot about levelling up, and we only need this because of the last 10 years of austerity, which has decimated local councils to the benefit of Whitehall. In the last 10 years, the number of people employed by central government has ballooned by 23%, whilst local governments have withered by 30%, ONS figures. Council spending fell by 18% in East Midlands, compared to 13% in the whole of England. It isn't just local services, even national infrastructure is bad here. Where's East Midlands electrification? Why is the train to Lincoln a little better than a pump trolley? Where's HS2? I don't want it. Austerity has held back our communities and increased inequality. In February 2020, before the pandemic hit, life expectancy was falling in the UK for the first time in 100 years, Marmot Review. Being even slightly poorer in the UK makes your life shorter. It's not just about the poorest people in the country, it's a linear gradient. If you're on the 90% richest, you're going to live less long than the 100% richest. It's time to redress the balance in favour of our local decision makers and to reduce resources, provide resources to start to match those that have been taken away. In summary, we support this motion and we ask for discussions to focus on reducing inequality, tackling the climate crisis, because this is the sort of transformative reorganisation needed to reduce our impact on the planet, has to be done locally with buy-in from local people. We welcome the fact that the arrangements affecting Nottingham Borough Council will be brought back to the Council for discussion prior to approval and adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, it's about time that public services got more funding. And if this is a means of doing so, and strengthening public services rather than undermining them, it's to be welcomed. As councillors know, I've long opposed the swallowing proposal of the county creating unitary council, partly because it's a total waste of time in terms of restructuring and waste of resources. I'll be supporting the report because I support cooperation and efficiency, but not if it reduces local democracy. And I take the leader's commitment that no commitment will be made without the support of this full council.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's danger of unanimity, isn't there, this evening, I think, by the sound of it. This sounds like a good deal. Greens are wholly in favour of devolution and the levelling up agenda. There is a lot to be done. There is a lot of improvements that can be made to the governance of this country as a whole. I'm sure that not everybody would agree with how that might be done, but certainly devolution and levelling up are things that I think we can all agree on. The East Midlands as a whole does get a rough deal when it comes to how much investment we get from central government and in terms of how we are allowed to build and develop the infrastructure that we all need, that would give us a basis for combating climate change, for improving the environment, for developing businesses, for improving the services that all our residents need. So I'll be supporting this. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm glad that it comes shorn of some of the more out there proposals that we've had in the past about sort of having mayors covering huge swathes of East Midlands. None of that seemed to work. Nobody could agree on it. I'm glad those have gone out. This looks more sensible, based on the county that we know and understand, and our residents know and understand. I'll be pleased to see all the local authorities working together for all our benefit to improve our lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullender. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We note that any outcomes of the discussions would return to council for approval. Notwithstanding the proposal in paragraph 6.4, we ask those involved in discussions on Rushcliffe's behalf to do everything they can to ensure that any agreement would cover all of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. We support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Upton.
I wasn't going to speak, but like Councillor Jones, I've campaigned long and hard against a county unitary, and I will. And so to me, the idea of this county model strikes a good cause. Because at the end of the day, we need money. You can't do much without money. We need a lot more money in the East Midlands. I think we've been a poor relation to the West Midlands for a long, long time. So this gives opportunity and potential to improve the residents of the whole of the county of Nottinghamshire, including the city. But fundamentally, as I read it, it keeps Rushcliffe Borough as Rushcliffe Borough Council. And I'm very proud of being on Rushcliffe Borough Council. It's a very good authority, as we all know. And any idea of a unitary taking away Rushcliffe was something I just could never live with. So, and it has potential, I would say, for economies of scale. You know, things like waste, planning, whatever, because there are pressures there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I just like the idea of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. No one else wishes to speak. So Councillor Edivin, you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think there's anything I wanted to add to what's already been said.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, you have the right to reply.
I was going to just address Councillor Gowan, but I'll just repeat one of the ambitions. So I haven't repeated it, I told you in the first place, haven't I? So I'll say it for the first time anyway. Apologies. Delivering on the levelling up agenda with economic growth produced alongside a demonstrable reduction in equality, including poverty, health and social care. Absolutely key to the levelling up agenda, and something very, very dear. For supporting this is things like skills. Of course, the skill attainment, particularly in the north of the county, is very, very poor. The city itself, of course, has huge issues with this, and this is going to be a big challenge for the city to really step up, to work with other people. It's become very insular. It's got huge financial issues, but we hope they're going to join us. We had senior management there today, and they know that if they do, it can actually bring benefits to there. As I mentioned about climate change, it's got to be absolutely a priority to make sure that we are tackling climate change and the environment, but doing a much bigger scale. I think everyone agrees, every district, every county, the county and the city are all doing their own work. But we think, a good example, for instance, we talked today about unification of planning in terms of houses, that we should have higher standards of new houses being built right across the county. So a developer can't build one sort of house in Ashfield and one in Rushcliffe and pick us off like that, which unfortunately they do. So that sort of standardisation was discussed today and really get those standards up. So thank you for all your comments. As I said, we will bring back the outcomes as we move forward. This is a huge journey, a really big journey. And it's going to be very tough because you're tackling cultures that have been inbred for many, many, many years. And sometimes I think some councils can be very insular and look upon themselves. Where actually, it's much better looking at the bigger picture and actually looking how you can do things better. I include Rushcliffe in this. We need to learn as well. We can do things better. So I'd just like to endorse that motion that I recommended and take the vote, please.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. All in favour? think Councillor Malander is right, but it is another unanimous vote, so I declare that vote carried. So now we come to motions. So the first one is going to be put to the council by Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make one minor alteration to the motion before you. Yeah, which is to add the words "as they are comprised on arrival." So it reads, "Consider deferring the application of benefit caps to families as they are comprised on arrival to avoid recreating poverty and homelessness." And I'm advised that need a show of hands to support it, so people will.
Yes, so it does not require a seconder for your amendment to your motion, but just the consent of the meeting. This does not mean that you're voting in favour of the motion, just for that addition. So could we have a show of hands, please? Thank you, that's carried. So now we have Councillor Binghamtown second. Oh, sorry, you haven't presented your whole motion yet. Sorry, I'm raring ahead. So, yes. Do present the whole motion.
Providing refuge for families from war-torn countries is a humanitarian act. Providing them with the homes to live in is difficult in all areas. The sooner they are moved out of holding hostels, the better. It is good that Rushcliffe is offering to provide 2 homes, but only for up to 8 people. I see that the government have just recently announced 3-year funding, which is not enough. This motion calls for 5-year funding, as happened with the Syrian resettlement programme. In Notts, each local authority's funds were channeled through the City Council, and it provided caseworkers at the very valuable Nottinghamshire and Nottingham Refugee Forum. I will describe some of the reasons why a minimum of 5 years is needed. The funding enabled the Refugee Forum, with some voluntary groups, to set up homes, renovate and equip them with basic furnishing, beds, bedding, cooker, fridge, clothing and some basic provisions. Once the bewildered family moved in, Refugee Forum workers apply for national insurance and NHS numbers, obtain ID cards, register with GPs and if lucky dentists, register with the job centre and universal credit, establish a bank account, Wi-Fi provider, gas and electricity provider, start water payments and a mobile phone provider. These are all complicated tasks which need change over the initial years and present ongoing needs for advice and support. Finding each child a place in a local school is not straightforward. Worse, there is no flexibility to place arriving secondary school children in a younger age group to give them a better chance at performing in exams. Furthermore, it's likely that not all members of Afghan families will speak English. It does not follow that some speaking English means that they can read it. As I know from our Syrian friends, our alphabet is alien and pronunciation difficult. For adults, a few ESOL sessions each week in college, or often online, helps a bit. There are huge practical and social realities of adjusting to our strange culture. Most arrive with long deferred medical and dental needs, which takes many years to address. There are the many effects of trauma, which emerge over time. There are the agonies of being safe, but permanently separated from those you hold dear, who have been left behind, including hearing of struggles for food, threats against them, and death. Refugees face many practical problems and need for interpreters. In some parts of the county and city, refugees are entirely dependent on the limited time of the foreign workers. So some examples of the more menial day-to-day support needs over 5 years include explaining letters, what school mean, what letters about the community charge or voting means, going with the person to medical appointments, visiting in hospital and advocating on their behalf, completing the county's online process for a choice of school, which is a feat in itself, supporting a child with hearing loss,
sharing sadness because the mother not seen for 10 years other than on WhatsApp has just died. Help with booking a slot and taking rubbish to the tip. Help on what food can be grown here. Driving lessons. Advice about kids wanting to join a football club and cost. Local supportive families and their networks, if connected and in it for the long term, can supplement the demands of the refugee forum workers. If Afghans are placed in your ward, please consider befriending them. It can open up a whole new look on life, be rewarding, and you learn a lot. Some problems lessen over the years, but others remain and new ones emerge. Hence the call for 5-year funding to local authorities. It will be as vital for Afghans as it has been for Syrian families. Family size and composition do not always match the property available. One Syrian family with 2 children placed in a 3-bedroom house is subject to the bedroom tax or spare room deduction. Conversely, some families from Afghanistan are known to be large, often with 6 or 7 members. They will be dependent on benefit for a few years. They will be impacted by the benefit caps. Tax credit limited to 2 children will not be given to any 3rd or further child born after April 2017. The cap on income from all benefits, housing, child benefit, universal credit, is £384 a week. That looks a fair income for some, but after rent, gas, electricity and other utilities, that is rarely enough to feed and clothe for instance, fast-growing children, especially when you're dependent on buses for shopping and facing our increasing cost of living. For large refugee families, that will mean not just poverty, but mounting debt and an impossible and possibly homeless situation. Hence, to avoid recreating homelessness and poverty, this motion calls on the government to consider deferring the application of benefit caps for refugees from Afghanistan as they are comprised at the time of arrival. I hope that councillors will support this motion, inshallah.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Bingham, you wish to second, please.
I'd like to second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Any discussion? So Councillor Brennan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure that no one could have failed to have been shocked, appalled and dismayed at the speed with which the situation in Afghanistan deteriorated following the withdrawal of Western troops. And in particular, and I make no apology for this, one can only look on with immense sadness and deep anger at the plight that is now befalling women and girls in that country. I'm afraid that powerful nations wringing their hands, clutching their pearls and retweeting hashtags will be of little comfort to them. And the West must surely do all it can to secure their safety and freedoms through whatever means are now available to us. That said, the UK government has been at the forefront of this humanitarian crisis and our response to it. There are programmes already in place, including Operation Warm Welcome, which works across all key agencies, many of the examples that have been cited already, such as the health service, schools, housing and social services, and the Afghan Relocation and Assistance Scheme, under which since the 13th of August of this year, the UK has evacuated more than 8,000 people whose lives have been assessed to be under serious threat from the Taliban. Under the new Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme, which totals some £200 million of investment, the government will welcome up to 20,000 additional Afghan citizens over the coming years. This council will work with our key partners to ensure that those arriving are supported to integrate successfully into local communities as they start their lives in this new country. The Home Office has announced that everyone coming here under these schemes will be given indefinite leave to remain. Granting indefinite leave to remain provides certainty and stability to those resettling in the UK. It provides the right to work and recourse to public funds, including social housing and homelessness assistance. The support in place is comprehensive and extensive, And this council stands ready to play its role in welcoming Afghan refugees into Rushcliffe. However, given that this scheme has only just been launched, it does seem to be rather premature to suggest already that it is inadequate. Many of those arriving from Afghanistan are anticipated to be, and the phrase which I don't particularly like, but close to the jobs market is how they're described. The evidence that 5 years of funding is necessary is not yet supported. Where is the evidence that the benefits cap will come into play or be a barrier to the settlement of these families? For the present, I don't think that we can anticipate that. For this reason, we won't be supporting the motion as it's currently drafted this evening, and I would like to propose an amendment. I appreciate we're in a rather large room, so I'm going to read it out if I may, Madam Mayor. This council welcomes the government's comprehensive plans to support the relocation of vulnerable Afghan refugees into the UK, but calls on the government to keep under review the decision to provide funding over 3 years to local authorities to support these plans, with a view to a possible extension if necessary. And in the case of large families, considers deferring, if necessary and for a limited period, the application of benefit caps to further support their integration into local communities. Thank you.
Will you have a seconder, Councillor Barney, please?
Yes, I second this amended. I second the amended motion, and I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to debate that amendment. Councillor Walker, please. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I won't be supporting that because I think it's so full of prevarication and uncertainty, and if necessary and whatever. So I wouldn't be supporting that change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Sorry, Councillor Walker. But you don't have to, no. Councillor Allenby, do you want to speak?
You can
say.
No, I was going to say things like, well, we were speaking about the evidence, but we do have some evidence that I mentioned about Syrian families and their necessary 5 years. So there is kind of evidence of it requiring 5 years based on previous refugees. And it's just kind of, it really waters it down. And it means that we're not asking for anything, we're not standing up for anything. So yeah, I don't feel we're going to support the change either. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mallow, do you wish to speak? Councillor Thomas?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the amendment changes the meaning of the motion, in my view, too much for it to be considered an amendment. And on that basis, I can't support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? So we'll go to this. Oh, yes, that's true.
I just want to say I've worked with a lot of Syrian and refugee families, and 3 years is not long enough, and they don't learn English within the time frame. They struggle filling basic applications, and they are on the poverty line, and that is not supporting them.
Thank you. So the seconder, Councillor Barney, please.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'd just like to, I'm going to speak from the heart actually on this, and go back to the words where we started this evening from the young representative from the Tamil community, who spoke very eloquently and powerfully and reminded us of the great words, doing good for others is something that is priceless. And I don't think there's a single one of us in this room that hasn't been moved to the core of our being, watching the absolutely horrific, sickening, politically mind-bending. I mean, what we've seen in recent weeks challenges the core of all of our ideals and all of our beliefs. And I hope and believe that every one of us would have watched those images and wept. I certainly did. And of course, that most poignant image of that poor mother holding her child aloft in the hope that an American would grab the child and take it to safety. And thank God that mother and that child were reunited. So these are very, very powerful, very emotive, but very serious things. And as we discuss this and discuss our care in our communities here in Nottinghamshire, of course, the way in which we live and the rights that we have, we're delighted to extend to refugees and families coming to our communities. And again, doing good for others, I completely accept the sentiment in Mr. Jones's, Councillor Jones's emotion in bringing this forward. Nottinghamshire has a proud record of welcoming and opening its arms, not least with the Syrian refugees in 2015, where I believe Nottinghamshire welcomed more Syrian refugees than any other county in the country. And in the week that all of these horrendous and horrific events were unfolding, bizarrely, I had an encounter with not one but two MPs. That's, I think, the first time in my life, such as the things that happen when you're elected to office. On both occasions, those MPs were forced to cut off what they were doing and advocate. They were on the phone, one pulled over in the car and advocated to fight to get people out of Afghanistan in those final and tense moments, doing good for others, something that is priceless. And also at County Hall, I happened to be on the corridor when we were working out, when members were struck what they were doing to work out how we could accommodate and get involved with the ARAP, the Afghan Relocation Assistance Policy from central government. And I know that councils across this county of all political persuasions have rolled up their sleeves and will do what they can to support these most needy and desperate people at this time. And it's for that reason, and with the same heart of care that I believe all of us have, and I don't think we should be politicising this in any way, shape or form, that I wholeheartedly get behind the government scheme which is in place. That is not to say that it can't be improved and won't be improved. But at the moment, in this proximity, we should support the scheme that's on the table, which is reaching out, that is working across party divides to do its best, to do good for others in a way which is priceless. And so I ask that perhaps we could take this to the vote and ask for a second.
So we're going to the proposal, the motion, the amendment, sorry, which Councillor Brennan.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Can I respond to the debate first? Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think we all agree, and Councillor Barney's heartfelt comments also. I think we're violently agreeing rather than disagreeing. I think we need to give the plans that the government's already offering a chance to work before we say they're not working and we need more. But that's not to say that at some point that time will not come, that maybe we do need more time, maybe we do need more funding over a longer period of time. But for now, I think the government has gone to huge lengths to put in place appropriate support for Afghan refugees. And I think we should give this programme an opportunity to work before we start asking to change it or to extend it. And I'd like to ask that we now put that to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now voting on the amendment, which is the sections in red that are on the screen. So all in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you. And any abstentions, please? So I declare that that amendment to the motion is carried. So that is now the motion on the table. I believe we have the which is the new substantive motion. Do we wish for further debate? No. Okay, so we'll move straight to the vote on the new substantive motion. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? This is the amended motion. This is now the substantive motion. Yeah, it's as amended. So, yeah. And any abstentions, please? Six. So what we've done is we've just voted on the amendment put forward by Councillor Brennan, and that was carried, so that becomes the substantive motion. So we're just voting on that again because we've voted on the amendment and we're now voting on the motion. Do you want to take the against and abstentions again? Yes. So, okay. Do you want to start again all together? Okay, so so now we're all clear on what we're voting on. So all those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? And any abstentions, please? Thank you. That is carried. And now we have another motion to put to the council by Councillor Thomas, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Why should we be collecting food waste separately? I'll give you 3 reasons. Firstly, if food waste goes into the residual waste bin, it either ends up in landfill, where it produces methane, or it's incinerated, producing carbon dioxide. Both of these contribute to global warming. Globally, food waste contributes between 8 and 10% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. However, if food waste is processed by anaerobic digestion or in-vessel composting, it produces compost, fertilizer and biofuel, making a positive contribution to the planet instead. Secondly, giving people a food bin to separate out food waste concentrates the mind on recycling. Seeing the amount of food wasted like this is one way to help us all understand how and when we waste food, and hopefully reduce this problem at source. With food waste in the food bin, the dry recyclables are cleaner and potentially more valuable. The residual waste bin is cleaner and less susceptible to odour, and could possibly even be collected less frequently. Thirdly, the Environment Bill includes the requirement for local authorities to provide weekly separated food waste collections for households starting in 2023 to 2024. Financial assistance may be available through government to offset extra costs for councils. In special cases, food waste collection could be deferred to 2030-31. But I do not see that Rushcliffe is a special case. This is not something we should be dragged into, kicking and screaming, leaving it until the last possible moment. We should be setting out our stall to get this done as soon as possible and send a clear message to our residents about the benefits. During the financial year 2019-20, 37% of local authorities in England provided a separate food waste collection service. 11% of local authorities provided a service collecting food waste with garden waste, and 3% of local authorities provided both services. The remaining 49% of local authorities did not provide a food waste collection service. How disappointing that a wealthy borough like Rushcliffe falls into this latter category. I'm sure it will be pointed out that this is not a decision that Rushcliffe can take, that food disposal is not our responsibility. That is of course true, but we have the opportunity to influence the relevant partners and agencies to bring this forward, and we should do so. I'm sure it will also be pointed out that we should not be producing all this food waste in the first place, and this is also true, but though it's not what this motion is about. I would support any measures to reduce waste in the food production process, along with household food waste generated in Rushcliffe. But it's not going to disappear, and we need to take a stance on the issue of separate collection so that our household food waste is dealt with responsibly. That's what this motion is about, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Jones to second the motion, please.
Second the motion, Madam Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Inglis, to speak first, please.
I think it's fair to say nobody will disagree to the benefits of separate food collections, which will go to help minimise climate change. I'm sure everyone will support this council and the rest of the country in achieving that aim. But again, using the word that was used earlier, I feel this is a little bit premature with the environmental bill nearly reaching its conclusion. And we know that the separate food collection is likely a key factor of that requirement. But we don't know what that's going to be. We're expecting some standardisation across the country. Is that going to be compulsory? Is that going to be advisory? Or is that going to be a recommended practice? Will it entail new containers? Will it need new collection vehicles? Or even new digestion plants? You allude that there may be finance available for that, but say until the bill comes out, we don't know what that will be. So we're a little piece of jigsaw in the jigsaw. If we were to go early and make a decision on this, it might be the wrong one. It might not fit in with what the government are trying to put in place for the whole country. So preparation, this council is working with partners. You allude to saying to do something in the future. You know, we'll see. We're already doing that. There is conversations, there is actions to improve that. It's not something we're looking forward to do in the future. It's happening now. So why we will support the ambition of this motion, we can't support the wording without further clarification to the implementations of the environmental bill. Motions need to be pragmatic and achievable. Hence, I propose to amend the original motion to reflect where we are, and the publication of the environmental bill will be a tangible trigger to move forward positively, not by influencing, but by this council being a driving force. So I propose to move an amendment. Okay, so there's not a lot of change in it. This council recognises that food waste contributes hugely to climate change and appreciates the carbon benefits that would be realised if Rushcliffe's household food waste was collected separately and processed by anaerobic digestion or in-vessel composting. The council will continue working with relevant partners and agencies to bring this forward as soon as practicable, following any national guidelines set by government in the forthcoming environmental bill. Let's move that forward. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, it's on again now. Councillor Clark.
Sorry, Councillor Thomas, you've got your mic first. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, pleasure in seconding the amendments. I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Thomas, would you be prepared to accept the additional wording that is in red on the screen?
No, I don't accept the wording. The environment bill might be delayed, but for any number of reasons, it might not come forward. At least half the country, over half the councils in the country are doing this already. It's the right thing to do. And Rushcliffe should be taking a stance, making a statement that this is the right thing to do. So no, I don't accept the amendment. And I would like to suggest a possible change that might be acceptable, and that is to stop the amendment after the word in-vessel compost, stop the motion after the word in-vessel composting, so that we're making the statement that this council recognises that food waste contributes hugely to climate change and appreciates the carbon benefits could be realised if Rushcliffe's household food waste was collected separately and processed via anaerobic digestion or in-vessel composting. And I would leave the motion at that stage to stop the implication that we would be waiting for something that may never happen in the environmental.
So, do you have a seconder for that amendment? Yes, get Councillor Gallen, do you wish to speak? Councillor Inglis,
Yeah,
do
well,
you agree with that amendment?
We'll second.
You accept that? So, now we turn to the debate on this amendment, which is to remove the section that starts council will continue working. So, so we'll move. So that's what we're talking about, the amendment to the motion. So that is to remove the last sentence. So, Councillor Gowland, that you wish to speak.
Well,
second.
Slightly weirdly, I'm going to sort of talk against the amendment. I accept the amendment, but I mean, we are yet again pushing the can down the road. We're yet again talking about this and not doing about it, but here we are. I accept the amendment. Sorry, I propose the amendment, second the amendment.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Jones first.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of the motion was to say that we need to get a move on, not defer it for something else. The government's response to the housing communities and local government committee on waste and the implications for local authority has published guidance and supporting evidence on the waste hierarchy, which includes anaerobic digestion of food waste. So the government clearly wants it to happen. The government supports anaerobic digestion as it represents the best environmental outcome for the treatment of unavoidable food waste. It goes on. And we're part of the 49% of councils that aren't doing it. And we should not be waiting for an environment bill. We should be planning now with partners, and that was the whole purpose of this motion. So I would plead with all councillors to support the amended motion, but the intention being to get a move on rather than hang around.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Gosh, it's a good job Greta Thunberg's not here. Oh, I should give you a right bollocking. We need to get on with this. And, you know, I'm glad that everybody agrees that we need to get on with it. We do need to reduce our emissions, methane and CO2. We need to collect food waste. We shouldn't be making the food waste, that's quite right, but we do. It's a thing, and we need to put it into composting vessels. We need to put it into anaerobic digesters. We already have anaerobic digesters. There's at least one business in Rushcliffe, which I think is down at Langer. There's probably others as well. We need to get a move on with this. We need to reduce our carbon emissions by any means possible. This is a climate emergency. We can't kick this down the can. We can't kick this can down the road. We can't keep putting it off. We certainly can't put it off for another generation. We shouldn't be putting it off for another minute. Let's go on here. Whichever way this turns out, let's pass the motion overall, amended or unamended. I don't really care, as long as we actually do something and get a move on to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. Councillor Barney first.
Yeah, I'm sorry to speak again, but I just can't resist. And you're probably going to think I'm a complete lunatic at this point. I am a passionate fan of anaerobic digestion because in my day job, I work in green energy and I get to visit anaerobic digestion plants all around the country, most of which were put in over a decade ago with lots of government support and lots of government funding. Unfortunately, the economics of them have been a little bit trickly. However, the economics are now improving because electricity prices have doubled in the last year. So the standalone methodology and the basis on which anaerobic digestion can work is coming back into play. I think that's really exciting. And if you're not all as enthusiastic about anaerobic digestion yet as I am, you ought to be, because that's what's going on inside your stomachs every night, not producing electricity, but keeping you alive. So I'm an advocate for it. And again, in this funny new world in which I live and reside as a councillor and the people I keep company with, I happen to know the chairman of the Environment and Transport Committee. The county council, who I know also is listening to my arguments and my endless madness about the excitement of anaerobic digestion and its role it's going to play in all of our lives. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gaunt, please.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about the wording of it. I'm not going to change anything, don't worry. So if our government, who love writing white papers, by the way, but it seems to be what they do just constantly, but we don't get any kind of things that come out of it. If this white paper turns into not a commitment for all councils to do this, but recommends it, are we saying that we will go with it? We are going to do this. If it turns out that this law comes down saying you don't have to do it, but it'd be a good idea if you did. Because if by admitting this, we're basically tying ourselves to that idea of saying, if the government say anaerobic digestion is a good thing, but we're not going to legislate, we're just going to say you can do it or you can't do it, are we committing to doing it then when that happens? That's what I want to find out, please. Because if so, then great. All I have to wait for is some actual action from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Clark, you reserved your right to speak before, so do you wish to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just checking that Councillor Inglis has accepted that. Yeah, fine. So don't need to go into any long, great discourse. Yeah, it's funny that Councillor Varnish had mentioned the County Council's Transport and Environment Committee, because I happen to know that the chairman of that committee is already in deep discussion about just these sort of very sorts of matters. Climate change has been emergency has been declared. We need to certainly get on with this sort of thing. In actual fact, for Councillor Mallon's benefit, there's an AD at Stragglethorpe as well. So it's just next to the chicken farm. So, which does very well and produces a lot of electricity. So it is something that we need to certainly get on with. We need to be investigating, seeing how this can be done. I have to say that the devil is going to be in the detail as regards money, because it will take money. Where are we going to realise that in order to achieve these sorts of things? So kicking the can down the road, well, you should be recycling the can, not kicking it down the road. So when the environment bill comes in, we'll be seeing how much of it is law and how much is it going to be guidance, because there might just be a bit of variation there as to what you have to do and what you are allowed to do. However, yeah, it's a sentiment here, it's an ambition. I don't think anybody can vote against that. We just need to look at the detail and see how it can be implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Because this motion has been amended in the way it has, it's now passed back to Councillor Thomas and Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones originally reserved his right to speak, so do you wish to speak again, Councillor Jones? Councillor Thomas, right to reply.
I'll just say really that I hope everybody can support this. To a certain extent, we've put the teeth out of it. But I think there's some sort of acknowledgement on the floor here. This is something that needs to be done, and it needs to be done because it's the right thing to do, and it needs to be done, not because the government's telling us to do it. I think we've got something that everybody can agree with, and I hope that we all do agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you. So now go to the vote on the motion, which is as it is on the screen. So with any other wording removed. All in favour, please. Okay, thank you. All those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. That is carried. Now we have another motion, which is from Councillor Walker, please.
So the planning white paper reforms remove some of the ways in which people can engage in the planning system. And it means that for most development, there'll only now be one point at which people can have their say, and that is during the preparation of the local plan. As the local planning authority, I'm sure council, we can all agree that a debate needs to be had about this proposed package of reforms, which represent the biggest shift in England's planning system since the 1947 Town and Country Planning Act. Change is definitely required. We've all borne witness to people's powerlessness to make effective contributions to the process and ongoing enforcement breaches on many sites across our borough. The Labour Group would like to see these reforms. 1, increased transparency. For example, what's the basis for assessment of housing need? 2, more effective engagement with the entire population regarding housing. Is there sufficient meaningful information? Can we understand the future impact of building? Are we engaging with young people in our borough? 3, we'd like to see truly sustainable building without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. 4, wildlife recovery and easy access to nature. The Wildlife Trust has said that these reforms show no integration of nature and are highly likely to increase nature's decline. 5, increased funds and resources and the use of adequate data. We welcome the idea of making it easier for people to get involved in planning and shaping the places where they live and work and play, but these proposals fall short of that intention. And as the local planning authority, we need to unite our voice of concern that these proposals will fail to tackle the challenges of the 21st century. So I'd like to call this council a halt to the destructive program of so-called planning reforms set out in the Planning for the Future, other white paper, particularly the zoning proposals, which keep local councillors, communities and democracy at the heart of the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I believe your seconder is Councillor Gowland, please.
I second the motion and please serve the right statements.
Councillor Upton, I believe you wish to speak first.
Yes, thank you, Madam. Simply got a bit of feedback there. But, well, as chairman of our planning committee and a member of the county council's planning committee, and having dealt with planners and planning systems and law all of my working life, I think many of my Conservative group believe that the planning system does need some reform. Some of the current planning rules are simply no longer appropriate. In my opinion, some are over prescriptive, some are not strong enough, and some are not relevant to our current challenges. However, it's vital that any reforms are carefully considered with input from all those who participate in good and effective planning. This council responded to the government's 24 proposals. I've got a copy of the quite significant response we made there, along with, I guess, the majority of other local planning authorities in the country, to the Planning for the Future white paper. And we stressed in that response many times that it's vital that planning is founded on local democracy. So as I say, we believe that the planning system needs urgent reform, so we will not be calling on the government to halt its planning reforms. And whilst it has paused the process, I believe to consider the huge amount of responses, as I say, 24 questions to each local planning authority. That's a huge amount of response, because they weren't just tick boxes of yes, no. Each one has to be read and evaluated. We, the Conservatives on this side, will press on with building more houses in many of our local Labour authorities. And locally in Rushcliffe, we will continue to build more socially affordable homes than anywhere else in the county. So to conclude, I hear the points that Councillor Walker made. One or two of those I don't think are relevant to planning. The sustainable homes and
and the improvement in efficiencies and the like, I think don't belong to the planning reform. They belong more to the building regulations and that sort of things. And I think on nature and wildlife, the majority of our developments, and many, would in fact increase. And there would be a net gain to biodiversity in many of our developments. However, to conclude, the Conservative group does not support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, please.
I'll be supporting the motion. I rather wish that all councillors were given copies of submissions to the Secretary of State on matters of this order. That would have helped this debate no end. But in a speech in 2020, the comedian in charge, Boris, argued that New County was slowed down house building. Apart from denigrating the environment and biodiversity, we know his statement is rubbish because the Local Government Association itself has pointed out that more than 1.1 million homes have been given planning permission over the past decade, which are still yet to be built. And in addition, 1 million homes allocated in local plans have not been brought forward with planning applications. Land banking and slow build suits developers. The more gradual the build, the higher the price and profit. It would make more sense to penalise developers for slow builds. The white paper had an undercurrent of blaming local planning and local authorities for delays. It also makes statements like green spaces would be protected by allowing building on brownfield sites. Another smokescreen for developers' penchant for building on green fields. And I don't accept what Councillor Upton has said about protecting wildlife and green spaces, because that's certainly not what's happened at Sharp Hill, as some of you, including yourself, know. The white paper also proposed that homes should be built to be zero carbon ready by 2050. Far too late and far too imprecise. Proposals did nothing to reduce the cost of housing, to meet the aspiration of generation rent, nor to increase the amount of social rented accommodation, although I accept the comments that Councillor Upton made about locally in the provision. They do not address the astronomical cost of land once designated for building. What would reduce prices is allowing local authorities to compulsory purchase land at agricultural value for building, as happened when the rate of homes was being built was at its highest just after the Second World War. The proposals were for zones. One zone being planning permission in principle would be granted. The only controls would be a later technical details consent process. Again, another developer's charter. It's difficult enough for members of the public to fathom the depths of planning proposals as they are now. But to comment on zones without specifics is likely to make residents further jaundiced and disenchanted. Over the years, the government has reduced the scope of local planning control, permitted development rights have been extended and housing targets imposed. But as the local government itself association says, local democratic oversight and community engagement are critical factors in ensuring trust and transparency in planning decisions in all aspects of the planning system. I support this motion because I think we should let the government know that we oppose the direction of those proposals. We want more local involvement and control, not less. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this is an interesting one, isn't it? I think almost everybody in this chamber, and probably in every other council chamber across the country, would agree that some kind of planning reform is needed. It's not working well in this country. We need to look at ways of improving the process. Is the current white paper the right way of doing it? Probably not on balance, but we do need to have some ways of looking at it to make sure that we have a better way of delivering the housing that we need, businesses we need, addressing climate change, to make sure we have zero carbon developments, not by 2050, certainly, as Councillor Jones has said. They should be built now, and we should have been building them the last 10 years. We know how, it's not rocket science. So yes, I'll be supporting this motion. There's some interesting things in the white paper. I won't deny the concept of zoning is something that is widely used in planning throughout many other countries around the world. Why shouldn't we just look at it? It's an idea, but I don't think it's one that's going to work. And I think it would run headlong into the very local democracy that we've been praising in parish councils, certainly earlier on in this meeting. I can't think that many of them are going to be very happy about having all sways designated for this particular type of development or that particular development. I think we've run into a lot of problems at Bingham, Ruddington, all the others as well. So I would agree with this. I think that it is an issue that does affect local councillors, our communities, our democracy. I think it does lie at the heart of how we bring people into the process. I don't think the white paper is going the right way. I'm not saying it's not got good things in it somewhere. Sure it has. I'm sure once it gets into Parliament, it's going to be kicked around in the Lords and the Commons quite a lot, and possibly heavily amended far more and in great depth, way beyond anything that we discussed this evening. But I think this is sending a message. I think it's saying maybe we need to take another look at this, and I'll be supporting this amendment, motion, and I would urge you to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Manager. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, before I start speaking, if there's something that needs to be resolved, perhaps by means of an adjournment. There seems to be some sort of post-it wall going on the other side of the room. Okay, well, so long as everybody's listening, that's fine. The planning white paper would reduce the democratic engagement in planning decisions without any significant improvements in efficiency. By and large, residents care deeply about their locality. They engage in planning matters readily when the impacts of development affect them and plans can be interpreted and understood. They have local knowledge to improve and shape development, but most people are not planners, and when it comes to engaging in plan making at a strategic level, huge investment of time and effort is needed, as well as some prior knowledge and skills. Few people get past this hurdle. But individual planning applications always generate interest. Neighbours are consulted individually with a letter through their door. Notices on lampposts do actually work. People are aware that an application will have an effect on them, and they can interpret and understand the plans. Cutting out this stage is a huge retrograde step in terms of involving the public and needs to be rethought. One of the aims of the changes is to bring forward more quickly the building of more homes, but delays are not down to the planning system, as others have said. Local plans allocate sites and outline permissions are granted. Very often, it's the next part of the process that stalls. Greedy land banking needs to stop. Interventions are needed to master plan large sites so that they're brought forward quickly. Some alarming changes have already been made in anticipation of the planning bill. For example, changes to use classes, extending permitted development rights, changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, changes to housing targets. These creeping changes need to be stopped as well as the planning bill, which, to be honest, looks as though it's on the rails anyway. Time for Rushcliffe to step up and let the government know how we feel, in particular the new Secretary of State, for levelling up housing and communities. We support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Rex Walker, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. We've heard in the debate some ideas of what would be better than the white paper, but that's not what the motion says. It simply calls to halt reform. I hope Councillor Walker won't mind me highlighting something, an irony at the heart of this motion, calling as it does to conserve a process that has regulated planning decisions for generations, insofar as we're the ones who are supposed to be against progressive ambitions and in favour of the status quo. So despite being a Conservative and a proud one at that, I can't support a motion calling for a halt to reform of the planning system. We're not building enough houses. The reasons for this are varied, but the planning process is a key reason why not. I expect that many of you would experience the same response as I have when discussing housing with our residents. Yes, I know we need more houses, just as long as they aren't here. Peeling under the surface, I speak to many residents who are just as concerned, if not more so, that the supply of suitable properties for them or their children to move to is just not there, and that's not good enough. If we're to solve this issue, we must be bold and brave enough to move beyond this simplistic approach. I don't want the houses in Gotham that would result in further greenbelt erosion. Councillor Gaunt doesn't want them in Ruddington that would result in increased flood risk. Councillor Thomas doesn't want them in East Leek that would result in changing the nature of the community and place a further strain on the infrastructure. In isolation, these are all very valid concerns, but we do end up in a position where the only question left is, so where are they going? The white paper seeks to grasp this nettle, and the government deserves credit rather than criticism for taking on a complex, challenging, and yes, controversial issue. There is some agreement, I think, is that where we do need help is getting the houses built that have already been given permission. And in the spirit of cross-party cooperation often sought during full council motions such as this, Madam Mayor, I wish to end by extending requests to Councillor Walker for her assistance in keeping local councillors, communities and democracy at the heart of the planning process. This authority is trying to deliver 3,000 new homes at Fareham. And said delivery is effectively stalled at present due to the City Council's inability and unwillingness to complete a land sale, the heads of terms of which were initially agreed 2 years ago. These delays create significant pressure on our housing land supply and consequently increase the risk of further housing allocations coming forward in places we do not, as an authority, want them.
Can I point of order that
So
has
that-
nothing to do with the motion at all?
So I may suggest that a more
Having a go at
impactful and helpful approach than this motion to addressing our planning issues
What about housing then?
would.
The motion, this motion isn't
I'm
about
suggesting-
housing, it's about reform being brought in on white paper.
On planning,
Yeah, but it's
Madam
not
Mayor, I
about
was about
housing.
to suggest what
We're
I
talking
would
about
consider to be
completely
a
different
more
issues.
impactful approach. But I will happily end there.
Okay, you've had quite a long time anyway. We need Councillor Eddie Bean next, please.
Madam Mayor, I think I'd just like to underline that the reason that we can't support this particular motion is that we as a Conservative group believe it's badly worded and it doesn't actually take the argument forward. We're not prepared to support a motion that calls for a halt to planning reform. We all believe that planning reform has to happen. And as far as we're concerned, the wording of this is such that it's calling for a halt to planning reform. That's how we've read it. We have made a detailed response, as Councillor Upton said, to many aspects in the white paper, and this has been sent from the Borough Council following a consultation, and there are 24 proposals. Rushcliffe was very negative on many of those proposals in the white paper. It's not that we support the white paper, we don't support stopping planning reform.
Thank you, Councillor Eddie Bean. Councillor Gaunt.
Thank you. I'd like to help you clarify that so you can actually vote for it, because thank you, Madam Mayor, and that's just, if you read more than the first line, which seems to be what some people are stuck on, which is the government to halt planning reform, you then read the next few sentences, very clear. Set out the current planning reforms set out in the planning for the future white paper, right? Not stop planning reform. We're not calling for that. We're calling for a halt to the current white paper as it stands that is going through planning, which will have zoning within it, which will remove powers of local councillors to decide things, right? So that's what we're asking to do, to halt that, okay? That's all, just halt that. Then engage in a proper and reasoned debate about what they would do instead, okay? That's all that's happening, nothing more. So not calling for a halt to planning reform, we're calling for a halt to this particular planning white paper so that we can move forward in the future and just read it again. It's quite easy. Then we can all vote for it, okay? Because if you read the whole thing, it makes sense. We're having a debate, and in the debate, we listen to each other, and it was very clear what we were asking for. And if we don't listen, we've already made our decisions before we came in the room. It's very difficult to see how there's any point in having a debate. It's nice of you to listen and, sort of do due process to it. And unless you're actually listening to what we're offering and saying, there's just no point, is there? So we were trying to say quite clearly, we want to pause that there and then revisit it at some point with some new ideas, because this is too damaging for local communities. That's all we're asking. Thank you. So you can vote for it quite clearly.
Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whilst I encourage healthy debate, I don't think it helps being colleagues when I'm listening to colleagues and making speeches, etc. Than to be shouted down and then shut down. I think it doesn't encourage democracy, and it doesn't encourage debate, because I was listening. So I think it was very rude, and I think the councillors should apologise for it.
I think this is just the nature of debate. If there's no one else who wishes to speak on the motion, then Councillor Gowland, you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, anybody who knows me, my planning committee, I definitely want planning reform. And I believe this motion, as written, if you read it carefully, is completely consistent with calling the government to just stop this particular type of planning reform as set out in the white paper. As Robert Jenrick said about the county deals, we need to be devolving power to local places and close to systems. Maybe he should have taken his own advice and he might still be in his job. Local residents need to decide what happens in their areas. They need to decide, they need to maybe have targets from national government at the moment. They need to decide where that housing goes for their young people and for their residents who want social housing and similar. We also need input on piecemeal changes to the housing stock in the neighbourhood, extensions. I think it's a bit hard to see how the housing developments are good for the green spaces. That's really pushing it. I mean, the bird boxes don't really cut the mustard. However, we need houses, we need places for people to live, as well as having a planet we can live on. So we need to be rearranging everything and about all the ways we work and the ways we live to reduce our carbon footprint. I'm sorry to keep repeating myself. And to protect our most vulnerable residents. And for this, we need 20-minute society, and we can arrange that locally. This requires local people making local decisions that work for them. As Councillor Robinson said, possibly arranged best across the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowan. Councillor Walker, you're right to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I don't think I need to say that if councillors don't like the red hot, we can propose an amendment to motions, so it's more palatable for you. To suggest that net gain biodiversity is happening with house building is kind of similar to denying climate change. I mean, that's just literally crazy. And how you can claim that the no responsibility for sustainable housing as a local planning authority is also kind of just totally disregarding your responsibility in my eyes. That's, again, just a crazy claim. I would assume, by the disregard of this motion, that the council group, the Conservative group, completely backs the white paper. So I would like to ask for a recorded vote on this.
Yeah, we're just sorting out the recorded vote. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, councillors, I will call out councillors' names in alphabetical order, and it would be great if you could indicate whether you're in favour, against, or whether you wish to abstain. Councillor Adair.
Sorry, you haven't explained to me, but you're asking me to vote.
Voting on this motion that's on the screen in front of you, Councillor Adair.
I'm voting against that.
Councillor Bailey. Against. Councillor Bansal.
For.
Councillor Barney.
Against.
Councillor Begum. For. Councillor Brennan. Against. Councillor Bushman.
Against.
Councillor Butler.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Cumberlack.
Against.
Councillor Dickman.
Against.
Councillor Eddie.
Against.
Councillor Gaunt.
For.
Councillor Gowland. For. Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Healy.
Against.
Councillor Inglis.
Against.
Councillor Jeffries.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Richard Mallender.
For.
Councillor Sue Mallender.
Abstain.
Councillor Mason.
Against.
Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Phillips.
Against.
Councillor Perdue-Horan.
Against.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Sims.
Against.
Councillor John Stockwood.
Against.
Councillor Maureen Stockwood.
Against.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Upton. Councillor Verdi.
Against.
Councillor Jen Walker. Councillor Rex Walker.
Against.
Councillor Way. Councillor Gordon Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Williams.
Against.
Declare that motion is lost. So now we come to item 13, questions from councillors. Councillor Jones, you have the first question, please.
The question told us to Andy. Precisely when will the council get on top of the planning issues arising from the building on Sharp Hill and the several breaches of environmental requirements?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. It is in fact Councillor English who's going to reply to that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council acknowledges the environmental issues raised by Councillor Jones and takes the implementation and enforcement of the supplementary planning framework very seriously. As such, the council has recently restructured the planning service to create a new dedicated planning monitoring and implication role at principal level in order to take a proactive lead on the Sharp Hill enforcement and others across the borough. The planning service manager did meet with the director from the house builders at Sharp Hill last week to raise the concerns about potential environmental breaches and is expecting a response in the near future for that. In addition, a dedicated officer in the economic growth team has been appointed to facilitate the resolution and liaise with the developer and local stakeholders. The council is investigating the position, and where breaches occur, the council will seek to negotiate.
Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Jones?
Yes, I do, thank you. Given that the builders on Sharp Hill have not conformed to the council's supplementary planning framework document, and that buildings have been and are being erected much closer to the council's nature reserve wood than that specified by this council, what assurance can you give that the so-called developers will be made to apply them?
Councillor English.
Thank you. The council is investigating this position, and when breaches occur, the council will seek to negotiate compliance with the developer, and although it is hoped that won't be necessary, we use appropriate enforcement powers where it is and it is necessary. And obviously the answer to question 1 covers that investigation by the plan officer, that they have engaged with the directors to ensure that the breaches are corrected.
Thank you, Councillor English. And so the next question is from Councillor Gallen, please.
Please can you tell me how much voter ID will cost Rushcliffe Borough Council in running a general election?
Thank you, Councillor Robinson to reply.
The issue, Councillor Gallen, we just don't know, because we don't know actually what the election package will be, but we do have assurances from the government, and history provides that as well, that they do cover any additional costs of a voter ID and any other additional election expenses.
You have a supplementary question?
How many cases? Sorry, yes, thank you. How many cases of voter fraud were there in Rushcliffe in the last general election?
Councillor Robinson.
Sorry, Councillor, I can't give that information, and I'll make sure it's provided within the next 7 days. Okay.
Thank you. That concludes the business for this evening. Thank you very much for attending and managing to do so before 10 o'clock.